Hi Gary, Shane here.
Hey Shane, how are you doing?
I'm really good. I'm
Good, good.
just gonna set up the screen a little bit. Let me see if I can share my screen.
All right.
So you
What
were
time is it? What time is it there in Japan?
just after midnight,
Okay, it's a little late.
a little late, but I'll survive. Hey, I saw you were really busy on the weekend. Thank you so much for the amount of work you did there.
Oh, no problem. No, I wanted to catch up on things, and, you know. So this was my open chain weekend.
How are things on your end?
They're good. They're good. I'm actually just the right amount of busy. I'm getting enough business to keep me busy, and you know, enough money, and that's still enough spare time to do things that I like to do. So I can't complain. It's been nice.
That is excellent. That's a hard balance to get.
It is. It is. That's the problem with consulting is you don't. You go into consulting thinking you have control over your time, but I think you actually have a little less. So
Right.
yeah, but it's been pretty good this year.
I remember reading. I was doing consulting for many years as well, and I remember reading an interesting article just about the sheer amount of time that's put in ancillary to direct work, maintaining
Hmm.
contacts and so on and so forth. It's a lot of time.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It does. It does.
Now,
Yeah.
as I understand it, Miriam should be joining us.
Yeah, she did confirm.
She did indeed. I'm just going to check my email to see if. Oh, there we go.
Hi, this is Miriam. Sorry,
Hi,
Hi,
Miriam.
Miriam.
it wouldn't
Welcome.
let me.
You had a problem dialing in. Miriam, can you hear us?
Yeah, I
Oh,
can hear you.
okay,
Sorry.
wonderful. So, with your permission, I'll record this session with a little video so other people can refer to it. The video is just going to show the table. Miriam, I saw you dialed in by phone, so you won't see the table, but it's what Gary sent around in the email before our call. So is it okay with both of you if I record that video so people can catch up?
Sure.
Alrighty. Uh, I guess the beginning is to hand over to you, Gary, and to get an overview of how you think we can
Yeah.
improve
Well.
this. What were the problems, especially for
Yeah.
you,
Yeah.
because a lot of the stuff landed on you.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And one of my objectives of this call is just to learn from the experience and see if we can if there's things, especially if there's things that I can do to improve the product or the documentation, so that you know uh, it's easier for people other than myself to maintain the questionnaire and work with the web application. And some of it's selfish because I don't want to be the only person working on it. But I think a more important objective for this is to make sure that there's backup and it's easy for other people to do it. So if there's a need to do a quick update or somebody wants to do something relatively quickly, you don't have to wait for my availability if I happen to be traveling or something like that. Um, so I was kind of watching out for that on this trip. And Shane, I appreciate you doing most of the work to do the updates. And I thought it went reasonably well. There were a few glitches in the application and a few glitches in the updates. And I think we captured most of those in the issues I sent. So what you have on the screen is just everything that we've recorded in GitHub. The first table are issues from the questionnaire itself, the questionnaire repository, and the second table is for the web application itself. But, before jumping into that, Shane, I was just wondering, and Miriam both, if you could just relay your kind of anecdotal experience. There might be things that we didn't capture in the tables. How do you think it went? Is it something where we have a long way to go to make this easy to do, or is it something where if we just did a few simple things, it would be easy to maintain? Maybe just share your thoughts a bit.
Sure, a pleasure. So on my side, I felt that probably the biggest challenge we have is simply a lack of enough eyeballs. It came down to an awful lot. You, me, and Miriam essentially commenting on and suggesting expansions, and a little bit also from our translator into Japanese. But for the rest of the community, we got very little active engagement, which of course meant on the technical side a greater overhead for you, and on the kind of editorial side, greater overhead for myself and then Miriam as we made the final questions. So I think that's a pretty big issue, especially with the what happens if someone gets hit by a car consideration.
Yeah.
We don't have much redundancy, and that was something I thought was a challenge. The second thing I thought was a little bit challenging was to get my head around how to edit strings or update some of the data. And this wasn't a huge problem by any means, but it just took a little bit of thinking through. And like when I proposed the new front page for the web app, and I think we're still waiting on the translator to confirm that's ready to go. That kind of thing was a bit clunky, and I think it's clunky because we hadn't fully documented it, and Gary, you've already gathered together some threads on that, and it's my action item to improve the documentation on how to do that stuff. But yeah, that was a little bit challenging.
Yeah. Good. Miriam, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think we were personally, I think we were kind of too late in the process. I had started looking into that, but then, we had missed a couple of calls before, and it was just, also too late catching up with what was going on with the specification as such, right? Which makes sense to a certain extent, but I think, had we started actually looking into the questions maybe 2 calls earlier than we, actually started, or we never started, we probably would have gotten some more engagement on other things as well. So, that's an action item for me, definitely. I have that, on my radar. I generally, this doesn't have anything to do with this. I feel this whole questionnaire is just not, or it doesn't appear to be part of the whole setup, right? Because it's still kind of removed from the general website and how everything else is included there. And I also feel that keeps just people from engaging there. But that is just, my take on it. It doesn't need to be any kind of true, and there might be totally different reasons, but that's just how it always feels for me. We started doing this, and it was kind of a test run, and now it's there, but it's I don't know, for some reason not really included in the entire ecosystem, if you want to call it that. I don't know if we can change it. I just wanted to put it out.
Good observation, though. I wondering if I hadn't really thought about that as much, because it's always front and center to me because I'm just working with a lot of on the technical side. But I think you're right. Perhaps if it was more visible, we'd get more eyeballs on it, and perhaps some more community engagement. That's a good point.
I guess it might be to some degree inverting our current process, which is where we deploy the questionnaire to the web app, and then that can deploy to PDF. Maybe we need to have the questionnaire living on the website, perhaps even as a web page, so people can look at the questions, then they can do the conformance app, and then download the PDF. So maybe our beginning point should be a HTML version on the website, so it is front and center. And just a thought. Just a thought.
Yeah, no, I like that. I like the line of thinking on that. And the other, there's also the request somebody made of a spreadsheet version.
Yeah.
So maybe just making now that I'm probably going too far into the problem solving on it, but do we do the current version? Do we do one that's in process? But anyway, making the HTML version as well as the PDF and the I think technically there's definitely solutions that we could do that wouldn't be that challenging, and it'd be kind of a fun project for me. I mean, just so you know, I know you might worry a little bit that I'm working too hard, but I had a lot of fun this weekend programming. It's what I like to do. It's like a hobby. It's like woodworking. So as long as there's no pressure to get it done, it's actually kind of fun. So I don't mind going in and doing an HTML version of the questionnaire that if we found a place to place it in the main website, and if I had enough information on the style sheets and things like that, I think we could do that. It might be an interesting solution.
So just to be sure, we would have the questionnaire in whichever version available on the website as an HTML version.
Yeah.
But the actual web app would still be running separately, right?
Yeah. So there'd be
because yeah. Okay.
It would be a version of the questionnaire you could see and perhaps download as Excel, and then you can click the web app to actually do the conformance, the self-certify.
I think that makes sense because I have received quite a few requests where you can find information on, just the questions you need to expect on the questionnaire, and it's always straightforward, and you can tell people, log on, just click through, you can see the questions and things like that. But I have a feeling at least those companies that are not, or feel they are not far enough along, they just want something in print or, something on the website where they do not have to enter any information. So I think that might also be helpful for that and, doing some outreach. I think there should be a clear link to the web app, but I think we all agree on that anyway, so that's fine for me.
Yeah, and just maybe a little bit too much detail again, but the way I'm thinking of it, right now we have the everything is driven from that text file that's in the questionnaire repository, and I think it's just questionnaire.json. The file that has that is a little challenging to edit. So I definitely hear you on that, Shane. But once that's been edited and updated, it actually automatically generates a PDF file. Once those edits are accepted into the repository, it automatically generates the PDF file. So I'm thinking it's not going to be too much work to automatically generate an HTML page that can be, included into the main web page. So every time we go through a process and we say, okay, somebody's proposed a change, we've accepted the change, and now it just automatically gets published somewhere. And that also is the thing that drives the questionnaire in the web application. But it's there, both the web application and the website would be driven from the questionnaire file. So it's not like the questionnaire, the web app gets updated and then the website gets updated. It's actually both are driven from the same file, if that makes sense.
Right. So we'd have a single source of truth that always has to be synchronized. We still have a buffer there where people would make comments on what they can see on the website, and then we have to include it back in the JSON file, which is a tiny bit technical, but we can make a guide for that, I think.
Yes, but I would not want everyone to be able to just work on the JSON file.
Well, they can submit an issue, they can submit a change, but it doesn't mean that they'll actually push it onto the web app.
Okay. Perfect.
Right. Yeah, I'm kind of modeling the process a bit off of how the SPDX legal team is working, and I know that the JSON file is technical. You should try editing XML files. It's even worse. It's even more fraught with danger as far as making one character errors and everything getting messed up. But what they do is anybody, in fact, they encourage the community to submit changes directly, but they go through a review process, and then they're basically accepted by the legal team before it shows up in the license list. Yeah. So we could take a similar approach. Although right now, since really mostly the three of us doing the review, it's a fairly quick meeting. They actually have, I think we have 6 different people with commit rights on the license list. It'd be great to get us up to more committers, because I think that would relieve some of the pressure on us to do all the reviews. But I think it works fine for now, even with just the 3 of us.
I think so too. I think, like I said before, I think if we decided on like a last deadline, or even any kind of deadline from when we start to review the questionnaire to make sure it aligns with the new specification, we will get more committed to that.
Mm-hmm.
Just in general, because I think this time everyone on the calls was still working on the specification, which makes total sense. We just should have started with also changing the questionnaire at some point. And personally, I think two months back, or 2 months before it actually gets released, or the new specification gets released, would be the right amount of time. That would still give you a last call, like one call before, one call to discuss, one call to agree the changes, because honestly, it's never been that we had to change the entire questionnaire. So, most of the time that should work. I think, we just never told anyone we were going to change the questionnaire as well, which should have been obvious to everyone involved in this long enough, but, we never said anything about it. So, I personally feel it's kind of hard to expect any commitment, or like any commits or changes or suggestion involvement, however you want to call it, right? So, yeah, I think that's something we can change.
Miriam, would you be able to take lead on, describing a workflow for that, so that can be one of the documentation outcomes?
Yes.
All right. So I understand one of my action items, Gary, is basically to describe the process of engaging with and submitting to the JSON file. So
yeah, that would be really helpful, because I think I'm too close to the technical side to do a very good job writing up the process. So if you could do that, that'd be great.
Sure. Okay. Now, are there any other kind of sticking block items that we need to cover in a little bit of depth?
I don't think there's any other detail. I sent you the email with the analysis. I mean, my takeaway from it was on the WebApp. Most of the issues we ran into were bugs in the code that were made actually when the application was originally written, and we just hadn't run into them until recently. So I thought that was kind of interesting. I think what that tells me is that the application is just getting used more now than it was before, and that's perhaps what's uncovering some of these issues. I don't know why we didn't run into them before. I guess the other thing is that it tells me is we're not testing it enough, and some of the testing that we would need to do can really only be done in kind of a production environment. So if we think it's an issue, and I don't know if the issues we ran into are serious enough to really change the process that much, but if we wanted to really address those issues on the web app, what we would do is have some kind of a user testing phase where we would sign up people. We would not deploy the code to the production website, but deploy it to a kind of a test instance, and then we would ask volunteers to test out a little bit more formally than we've done in the past. So basically go through all the scenarios, signing up new users. That's asking a lot, I think, of the volunteers to go through the full scenarios. So I'm not really suggesting that. I'm just saying that if we do think it's an issue, that would be one approach to avoid those types of problems.
Well, I think it can work if you set it up as you can already test the new questionnaire to become whatever 2.1 conformant, right? So you say whatever you just announce this within the OpenChain working group, right?
Yeah.
And you say, okay, anyone who wants to test this and actually become 2.1 conformant before anyone else can do it, please, raise your hand and we'll set up the account and you can test it. I think that can work, but then we need to, include, let's say, another month of time to allow for that. So it would be whatever, let's say the specification comes out on the 1st of April, and then you need to give them a month to actually test it, and then the questionnaire goes live, or the WebApp goes live on the 1st of May or something like that.
Well, this makes sense, and we do have more time because it's by no means certain that there will be another version of the OpenChain specification for quite a while. So it's more likely that we'll be tweaking the existing questionnaire because this version is going into ISO. So this version won't be an ISO standard until Q1 or Q2 2020. And at that stage, it doesn't make sense to introduce a new standard at that point. So we're probably looking at 2 years or more before the next version. So it gives us plenty of lead time.
Okay.
Yes, but the only question I have, if this goes to ISO, do we still maintain the web app?
Yes. We would still maintain the process for updating the spec and the web app. ISO would be simply a formal version of the document, which can be downloaded from the ISO website.
Okay, and you could still declare to be OpenChain conformant through the web app.
Yes.
And if ISO said, well, for this to become an ISO standard, you need to add this and this and that, then that would be included in, let's say, a 2.1, maybe a 3.0 or something like that.
Yes,
right?
Though the process we're going into will not be one where we expect to get any suggestions on the standard, because we're using publicly available specification, which says the standard is complete and industry deployed already. So we actually don't expect to have any adjustments going through ISO.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah. The only adjustment will be the formatting of the spec. We're going to hire an ISO editor, and they'll edit the text and some of the structure, but the content will stay the same.
Okay, perfect. Understood. So just to make sure I got that correctly, you're saying within the next 2 years we would not get a new specification, but it's possible we'll push out a new questionnaire sometime in between to make sure it's aligned and we had some review process or whatever.
Yes. Unless there's a pressing market need for an update in 1 year, we probably would be taking a lot longer than that to update the specification. But of course, we will have continual updates of the questionnaire and the self-certification as we get feedback, what's confusing, and so on and so forth.
Okay, but then we should maybe consider to say, how long has the specification been out? 2 months, right? So maybe give it until after summer break and say, well, we're actually looking into the new questionnaire, into updating the questionnaire again. This is the process we want to follow. This is the timeline. People start reviewing, please, and then please submit your, errors that you found in the process or something like that.
I certainly think that having a public process to revisit it would be very useful. Meanwhile, of course, as organizations go through it to become conformant, we get piecemeal information in.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
So, but I understand you correctly that you're in favor of a formalized process, right?
Oh, yeah, I am indeed. I mean, currently we also have a certain window of formality available. For instance, with the questionnaire, if there are known errors or omissions, people can submit an issue on GitHub, so they can record it there. Yeah. So that's kind of how the trickling of issues can come in. But a formal process to encourage active review, I think, would be very useful.
Yes, because quite honestly, I would also want to just review the entire questionnaire from a speech and, is it actually understandable perspective. That doesn't have anything to do with the web app. I understand that, but that's just a second part to that. Okay, yeah, understood.
And indeed, I think we need to do that sooner rather than later, because I have encountered some companies with some perception issues with questions. No blocking issue and nothing that immediately suggests that we can make it easier, but companies are looking at the questions and they're assuming that the answers might be more complex than they are. For example, one company had a spreadsheet recording how they answered all of the questions, but they weren't sure that that would qualify as a record of how they answered the questions, even though the spreadsheet quite literally contained all the information about how they answered each question. So, to that extent, they were reading too deeply into answering the question.
Okay.
Good.
All right.
Good. I did just a couple more. One of them, a couple more somewhat optional topics, if you guys don't mind.
Sure.
Related, of course, to this, but the one question I had, for the localization of the questionnaire itself, do you think we could open that up more to the community? Right now, we have, our localization person, JC, doing the translations. I know on the spec we actually have community submittals. And I'm not talking about the web app. I don't think this would work for the web app itself, but for just the questionnaire portion, that gets rendered on the PDF document and gets uploaded into the web application. I'm wondering if we could open that up for community submittals. And that means that we're going to have people going in and editing all the strings. But if we had a way to publish those results back out, in a PDF document to be able to review, and better validation, I think that's going to be key, so that if they end up making a mistake, copy paste errors, that will catch it when they submit the changes. I'm wondering if we could open that up so we get more translations available.
I would love to do that, and opening up that process, I think I might ask Alex, my administrative assistant, to help with getting out the call for assistance on that. Yeah, I think, because I think we're going to get Chinese, traditional, simplified, and Korean all from volunteers rather than hiring formal translators for that.
Yeah. So I think that would be great if we could get some more. Now, what's going to happen is in the web application, when you upload those languages, if somebody chooses a language where the web app doesn't support it, but the questionnaire does, the questionnaire is actually going to show up in the correct language, but the rest of the website will be in English.
Oh, that's fantastic. So we can actually deploy pretty quickly.
Yes. Yeah. So you can deploy. They're kind of independent. You can have the web app support a language that doesn't have a matching questionnaire, and vice versa. So so as soon as we accept a new language translation file, and we go into the web app and basically pull in the updates, it'll show up.
Well, that's excellent, and that'll make it much easier for me to solicit help. So, that's an action item. So on my end, process of contribution to JSON, essentially the process of updating, and look for volunteer translations around the questionnaire.
Yeah, and there is documentation in GitHub on localizing the files, but it hasn't been user tested. It was written by me, so I'm always a little nervous with. I'm always really nervous when I have engineers write user documentation. So
you're very modest.
So it would be good if whoever does it first, if they kind of make sure they feel very comfortable. Submitting issues if they think the documentation could be improved.
Sure. I might ask Haksung from LG and Jerry from Baidu to look at the that, because they're both engineers as well, so they'll have no trouble with the technical side.
Yeah, that would be great. And then the other optional topic I had, just in terms of the website maintenance itself, this is probably one of my own personal bigger stresses, is right now I'm the only one who has access to the Amazon instance. So if the site goes down or, becomes unavailable, and actually for the first time since it went live, I actually had to go in and do kind of an emergency patch, and that's for one of the users waited too long for the to verify their email address, and then they weren't able to log in. So I actually had to go in and kind of do a little bit of a little hack to get them enabled. So the challenge, of course, with that is if I'm on vacation and we have an issue like that, everybody's going to have to wait till I get back. So I don't know. I can think of a few different solutions, but I just wanted to kind of raise that as the ideal solution for me is that there is a technical volunteer who is that we trusted, because they're going to have access to the database. So
Right.
this is sensitive information. But if there's somebody else that trusted as a volunteer, I could give them access and train them, and then we have two people, who could fix things if something goes wrong. The other possibility is maybe if the Linux Foundation technical group, or I could bring in my actual engineers that support my application, but that would have to be paid for, because I don't mind volunteering time, but I don't want to invest too much in the operation for it.
Of course.
So
This is for the web app only,
yeah,
right?
just the web app, not the Questionnaire, just the web app.
Yep.
Yeah, it doesn't have the PDF or the HTML version at all. It's just the web app.
Yes, I was actually thinking the same thing when we talked about updating the questionnaire and things like that, and including the questionnaire in the website. That we had discussed not having the web app run by the Linux Foundation some time back, and I was wondering if that was still only on you. I think you're totally right that there should be someone else, and I think we should consider where to move this with more people having access to it.
Yeah.
And just to be sure, and if personally, I still don't know if it's a good idea to move this to the Linux Foundation, but I think it would at least give us some continuity for whatever happens, right? So maybe if that's an option, we should try and go for that. I don't know.
Yeah,
well,
I would still prefer a volunteer myself, because I don't know, I just like having a volunteer organization. It's just it just feels better, I guess. I don't know how else to put it.
Here's an idea. We've got about 100 people in the OpenChain Japan work group, and a lot of them are technical, and about 20 are very active contributors. Maybe I can do a call for help there and try to pull out a couple of people who will help us, and be on call from companies like Toshiba or Hitachi or Sony. Volunteer, of course, but totally trustable, totally solid.
Yeah, that would be the ideal, and I do have engineers that can help as well. If we wanted to put them on retainer, and I'm not trying to sell you on that at all, because to me that's kind of my third. My order of preference would be volunteer, Linux Foundation, and then I could bring in my BI solve team.
Sure.
To do that.
Well, whether we have
and the last cases would be for me to do it by myself. Well, I mean, maybe it's not a big issue either, because it depends on how mission critical we think that web application is. If it's okay for it to be down for a week, and that's the expectation, then the way we're doing it now is fine. But if there's an expectation that it's available, with it, critical issues need to be responded to within 24 hours, then we probably should do something different.
Yeah, no, I agree. And what I think is that LF Technical, well, first of all, they will charge us for activity taken on this, and second of all, the response rate has been relatively slow on issues, and they've got a lot going on. So for me, what I'd like to do is the volunteer and also get a quote from you on VI-Solve, how much it would cost to have them on retainer, so I can have that in the back pocket, and we can move there later.
Yeah, yeah. And if there's other outside engineering organizations to consider too, it doesn't have to just be my team, but the VI-Solve team, I did ask them if they'd be willing to do that, and they would be willing to do some kind of a retainer. So I'll talk to them again and see if I can get a give you an idea of what, or give you some kind of a proposal on that so that you can have that available.
That'd be great. And meanwhile, I'll go to the Japan work group and put out a call for help. And hopefully we'll solve the technical bottleneck issue where everything's on your shoulder and we always come to you. Now we're heading towards the time for the main OpenChain call, so I guess we should wrap it up here, unless there's any other urgent items.
No, we hit my optional ones too, so I'm quite happy. Thank you, guys.
That's great. See, the only thing, me worrying again, the only question I have, if we push the questionnaire in the web app and it's available in other languages, do we need to do more than just update the languages on the website? For example, imprint. If it's available in German, you would need to have an imprint on the website. And I'm just wondering if we're actually doing ourselves a favor if the other language versions are available in the actual web app. I understand having the questionnaire translated and just publishing the paper documents, as long as the rest of the website stays in English. I don't think that I think that should be fine. The only question I have is what happens, and I really don't know the answer, what happens if the questionnaire is actually in the web app and the web app is available in another language? At least that's how I understood this was. I don't know if we need to look into this. I just wanted to mention this.
Sure. We can get localization of the web app itself. Now, not the questionnaire. We can get localization of the web app done, but it would probably be a cost center.
Exactly.
But we can more easily get the questionnaire to appear in multiple languages, which I think in practice will be enough, that the controls are in English, but the questions display in, let's say, simplified Chinese. So I think that would work for now at least. I don't think we need to, as a matter of huge urgency, translate the web app into every language the questionnaire could be available in.
No, exactly. I understood that. That's not what I mean. So if you have the questions displayed in whatever, Chinese, let's say, are there other requirements, like legal requirements for the website as such and for the web app as such?
Not that I'm aware of.
I wouldn't know for China as well. Just as a gut feeling, I would say if the questions displayed in German, even if the rest of the website remains in English, you would probably need to comply with German law requirements, meaning, for example, you need to put an imprint on the website and things like that. Maybe we already have all of that. I just wanted to mention it because usually, at least what European courts do, is they look at the languages the website is displayed in, and then they, that's usually just one qualifier. The other question is always, can you pay in euros, things like that. But that's one qualifier to determine if the requirements of, let's say, I don't know, Italy or Germany or France or whatever need to be met. And I just wanted to put it out there because maybe, like I said, we're not doing ourselves that much of a favor if we actually display the question in the web app. Putting the questionnaire on the website in German, English, and I don't know, French, Chinese, I'm not worried about that, but just, displaying the questions in the web app. Yeah. And again, maybe it's no issue at all, but I'm just wondering.
It's definitely something we should look into before we go live. I think we can get the translations underway, but before we deploy, yes, we should probably dig into this.
Yes, I think so too.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. Good.
Sorry.
No,
that's a good one.
Actually, you triggered another quick question for you, Shane, on the changes that you made for, on the web app for the main page, some of the language updates. Is that something you think would be done frequently, or do you think that it would pretty much just be, a very infrequent update?
I think very infrequent.
Okay, good. Because there's things we can do to make that easier to update, but if it's infrequent, I think the way we're doing it now is fine. Okay, great, thanks.
Alrighty, let's wrap it up there, and let's put this out to the community, take our action items, and see what happens next.
Okay.
All right.
Thank
Talk to
you.
you in a bit.
Talk to you in 4 minutes.
5 minutes.
Bye-bye. Talk to you in 5 minutes. Bye-bye.